Great rewards don't wait, so why should you? Through the Invigor Book and Buy Grower program, you could earn a $30 per bag rebate when you book all of your Invigor hybrid canola by November 14th. Talk to your retailer. Terms and conditions apply.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. It is Friday, October 24th, and we've got a great show lined up for you today. We've got Ann Waasko of the Gateway Livestock Exchange. She's going to have the beef market update, and we are going to touch on what happened this week in the U.S. with the U.S. president potentially interfering in the cattle and beef markets. So we've got that. And then we've got the issues panel with Tyler McCain of CAPI. He's the managing director, and our own Kelvin Heppner. We've got lots to talk about, including, of course, the Blue Jays. The game goes tonight. I'm going to ask Kelvin how many games he thinks it will take for the Blue Jays to win, or will they win? If you've got feedback on today's show, you can zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com, or of course you can call or text that feedback line, 1-855-776-6147. Without further ado, let's hop to the break. Oh, but before we do, quick reminder, there is a bonus segment for those of you who downloaded the podcast. All right, now we'll take a break.
Kosher sucks.
Big time. And hate it. Really gets in the way. Awful.
But not anymore. Get a head start on tough-to-kill weeds like kochia this fall with Volterra EZ and Fierce EZ soil-active herbicide. Apply after harvest before freeze-up for up to 8 weeks of extended control in pulses, soybeans, and wheat next spring. Volterra EZ, Fierce EZ for kochia. Visit newfarm.ca/kochia.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
Soil health is under pressure, but real solutions start below the surface. Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure Humulite. Formulated for performance, backed by consistency, trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth Humulite. Learn more from Mine to Market at blackearth.com.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith, with Real Agriculture. And joining me now for the beef market update, as always, it's Ann Waasko of the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Ann, how are you?
Pleasure to be with you today. I'm good.
It's nice to see you so soon. We spoke even just a few weeks ago, which is good.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, it has been an incredibly busy 7 or 8 days on obviously the beef side, the market side, but also on just the uncertainty and political wrangling that's going on. So I want to start there so we can sort of unpack some of that. Obviously, political commentary can have an impact on markets. Where are we sitting right now? What have we learned in the past week?
Well, yeah, this goes back to last Friday and some comments from the U.S. president in terms of getting beef prices down for U.S. consumers. And of course, the marketplace didn't know, what does that mean? We're at, we've been at record high cattle and beef prices here in 2025 and long overdue for the cow-calf operators of North America. And so that's been good. And so when you hear, somebody of that level talk about getting prices down, it's, the markets didn't know what to think about it. So we've been trying, as you say, to unpack that. By late Wednesday, Of course, the USDA had been talking about, we have this plan. And so there was a 13-page white paper released later on Wednesday, and it went through a lot of the points that they're going to be working on to strengthen the beef industry, which and all of them, in my view, were not bearish, certainly. But the market didn't know that, right? So in terms of the futures market, and that's that whole uncertainty piece that we talk about, when the markets just get this little, tweet in the middle of the night or whatever, they try to respond thinking, it could be this, it could be that,
right?
And how, and of course there's lots of misinformation that goes around these kinds of things. And so at the end of the day, I think when the dust all settles, it's not overly bearish news. We heard overnight that there is going to be more TRQ for Argentinian beef to come into the U.S. And maybe want to talk a little bit about that. But again, these pieces, I think the market will settle down, but it's been a crazy 7 days, as you say, for these markets to try to understand, what does this mean and how do we trade? We're coming off of all-time highs, and is this it?
Well, and I mean, from the producer's perspective, and I've been following along sort of on social media as beef producers sort of react to this news, and I think many of them would say, government support for an industry, welcome. Government interference, let's say, does, as you mentioned, sort of add a level of unknown, of uncertainty, of volatility to it, and that's got a lot of people concerned. As you mentioned, as we sort of look into what the plan the U.S. may have when it comes to the beef industry, yes, these imports of beef from Argentina are part of that. I know we talked about this a few weeks ago, but before we sort of lose our minds about this, Canada is a country that imports beef from other areas for our, say, ground beef, our burger market kind of idea. Mm-hmm. So how do sort of imports of certain cuts of beef play even now in our beef industry?
Well, certainly when we're at this phase of the cattle cycle, which is numbers are down, cow kill is down, and of course that's the product that makes up a lot of our hamburger supply, which Canadian and American consumers love. Mm-hmm. Half of our consumption is basically in the ground beef form. We're short of that product. So we're not talking about muscle cuts, steaks and whatnot. We're talking about ground beef. And so we do import at these times of the cattle cycle, and we have been. Canadian imports of beef are going to be up about 20% this year, and I think the U.S. will be awfully similar, and that's been going on all year long, and it started back in 24. So, and we always import some of that product. We've never had enough lean trim to satisfy the consumer demand in North America for hamburgers. So to suggest that we're going to, or see the Americans bring more Argentinian beef of this nature, increase the TRQ, the tariff rate quota, for that as part of it, obviously part of some U.S. Argentinian trade deal. It's not the end of the world. One of two things, we're short of it. And secondly, or the U.S. is short of that product. And secondly, it likely just displaces something else. I mean, the market at the end of the day will take care of where the beef is going to come from. So the market sorts these things out. And just going back to your comments leading into this part of this segment, this question, you're right. The markets were doing exactly what they should do. They were supplies are down, prices were up. Give producers a little bit of moisture and great profitability, and they will grow the cow herd, right? Yeah. So that's the message I hear from producers is let these markets work. We don't need these interventions and these uncertainties. Yeah. We certainly need support, and a lot of those pieces in that 13-page white paper are simply good supports for the industry. Mm-hmm. So maybe having all of this on the table and out will settle things down again. But again, a very tumultuous week.
Yes, that is that is maybe the understatement of the day. Now, there is, of course, and one of the things that gets discussed and we discuss here, of course, on the Beef Market Update are the larger sort of fundamentals at play. You mentioned some of them, of course, a smaller cow herd, not as many cattle necessarily available. We've still got the Mexico-U.S. border closed to cattle movement. So, I mean, there are still so many bullish fundamentals here to support this industry and these prices.
Yeah. Oh, no, exactly. So on the supply demand side, the storyline is still very solid. We just don't need this peripheral things creating these uncertainties. And yeah, we need to expect them from time to time, but we sure don't need them every day.
Absolutely. Okay. So on that note, though, let's run through what the numbers did do this week in the face of all this.
It's amazing, Lyndsey, how, again, getting back to the fundamentals, the supply, the cash market this week said, okay, this is crazy news, but we still traded steady in the U.S. at the end of the day. Live cattle futures, though, just from its highs on December live cattle futures last Thursday, ahead of the start of all of this craziness, are down $10 U.S. So that did happen. Right. But the cash market this week was steady in the U.S. After all the dust settled. Trade in that northern area in Nebraska, we're going to call it 239 to 240. So that's steady to down 1. And dressed at 372, which is steady. So, like I say, the market's kind of shook that off. The choice cutout, that demand piece, because I know we've been talking about supply a lot here today, but that demand piece is still solid. The choice cutout last night compared to a week ago was $7 a hundred higher. It closed at 373. And again, so that seasonal, we always watch the seasonals of when demand, kind of improves during the year and when it comes off. Well, we're heading into November and the year-end holiday season. That's a great demand time for that holiday rib, as they talk about in the U.S. And so that's still really supporting that whole cutout. And it will as we, get close to wrapping up the end of this month. So all that is kind of holding very solid. Cutout was higher. Cash market was steady in the U.S. In Western Canada, we did lose a little bit of ground on the cash cattle, $5 to $5.05 delivered dressed. That's going to be called $3 to $5 lower than last week. We're sitting in a little different shape in Western Canada. We've got packers very comfortable with inventory, a little bit, you could even say long on inventory. So cattle feeders are having trouble getting as many cattle marketed as they'd like to. And that showed up in the Can-Mex on feed report last Friday, basically showing that feeders in the last while have been really struggling to get enough cattle sold. So the marketing number was down. Meanwhile, look at the calendar. We're into the heat of the fall run. Yeah. And so placements have been up. Marketing's down, placements up. Guess what happens? Your on-feed numbers grew. And so they were up. It should be nice to clean these cattle that are ready to go or past ready to go. We need to get those cleaned up to get the Western Canadian market back on track.
Mm-hmm. Make some room. That's for sure. Yeah. Now, one bright point, at least feed costs are down. So
yes. Yeah, that's been a support. Depending on who's listening. This is the beef market update.
That's right. So, we're allowed to enjoy lower.
We're allowed to enjoy prices. This, and that continues to be the case. And what an amazing fall! I'm not sure about your neck of the woods, Lyndsey, but it's been a great fall here to get things done. We could use it a little. We don't want to mess things up too much. It's been still very dry. I know we talked about lots of moisture in the summertime, but there's really been nothing since. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, because that producer that's going to go out and buy a bred cow or keep a heifer back, he's going to need to see that piece too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And Waasko, thank you so much for joining us here on RealAg Radio. And of course, the Beef Market Update. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Lyndsey. Have a great weekend.
You as well. Okay. We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola, it's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for this Friday, Lyndsey Smith, and it's time to bring in that issues panel. But of course, before we do that, a reminder, the time is running out. If you don't act now, your canola savings for next year will be gone. Save up to $75 per bag on canola with DeKalb Harvest Rewards, but only until October 31st. 1 week, everybody. Visit DeKalbRewards.ca for details. All right, as promised, here we are. We've got Kelvin Heppner, resplendent in Blue Jays gear, and Tyler McCann, Managing Director with the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute. Welcome here, gentlemen. Kelvin, I'll go to you first. How excited are you about tonight's game?
Oh, here we go. This is the first time in 32 years since we've had Toronto in the World Series, and it's been a long time coming. Sure, the Dodgers are the favorite. It's kind of a David versus Goliath thing here, but as I think it was Ernie Clement on the Blue Jays pointed out, didn't David win in the end? So we'll see how the Jays match up against the Dodgers starting pitchers. That's probably one of the big concerns, but it should be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to, well, actually, I'm not going to be mad at you for reminding us that it was 32 years ago, because I remember watching the series then as a teenager, which does make me somewhat uncomfortable that was 32 years ago. So there you go. And the David and Goliath theme, I think, will carry through the rest of today's show because we have a lot to unpack. Tyler, I'm not going to necessarily ask you about Blue Jays baseball because you and I probably share about as much experience on that one. But did want to touch base before we dig into the news of the week. How has your week gone? You're currently at a conference and joining us from a stairwell.
I am. On Tuesday, I was in the land of the Blue Jays for another Aero Food Institute conference. My one sports reference, Lyndsey, will be like, I think it is probably time to jump on the bandwagon, right? Like they've made it to the World Series, so we will probably watch the.
May as well.
Yeah, watch the game tonight. Will be the first Blue Jays game I've watched all year long. Better late than never. I guess could wait till Game 7, but we'll try and start it off.
Yeah, what a great time to join, Tyler. Great job.
Yeah, but it has been a kind of a bit of a hectic week. Lots going on in the world, and I don't know. It's hard to make sense of the craziness that's been this week.
Yeah. So just in the segment before this, of course, we talked to Ann Waasko for the beef market update. There was enough in this past week when we looked to our friends to the south on the beef side, which we talked about a little bit about what impact that may be. But Kelvin, let's kick it off with trade talks. Any trade talks with Canada? Apparently, friends off. Because the Premier of Ontario ran a very mean ad. So we are hooped.
A mean ad using the voice of a former U.S. president, that be a Republican U.S. president, that being Ronald Reagan. The Ontario government has spent a bunch of money, I believe it's $75 million on an ad campaign, running ads in the U.S. during the baseball playoffs, enlisting the voice of Ronald Reagan, speaking negatively about tariffs and the impact of tariffs and how consumers ultimately pay the price of tariffs. And so that has struck a chord with President Trump. And so last night on Truth Social, posting that all trade talks with Canada are hereby terminated. And this is also seen, he's implying that this is interfering with the decision the U.S. Supreme Court is going to be making on tariffs here early next month. And so, it's friends off, like you said. But I think overall, this is to go back to that analogy of a wrestling drama, this being a WWE drama. This is part of the roller coaster of the storyline. And we heard Kevin Hassett on Fox News this morning or last night, I'm not sure when it was, saying that basically this is just a breather. This is both sides saying we're not making much progress here at this point, or we've kind of maybe run into some more difficult patches in terms of the negotiations, and it's time to take a little bit of a break. And I think that's understandable, and I think it's not as big a deal, at least from my perspective, as what the wrestling storyline might lead us to think it is.
Tyler, this is, I mean, do you agree with Kelvin's assessment? Is this sort of just some drama for the sake of drama, or is this real?
I mean, nobody knows, right? That's the unfortunate reality of the world that we're in. I disagree with you framing it as a mean ad. It's not mean to say that tariffs make things more expensive for Americans. That's true. Like that is just the way the world works. I think if you look at kind of many things that Reagan said over his career, he was consistently against protectionism. He was consistently in favor of free trade as the way to grow the economy. He spoke about it as the way of the future. And I think it has been. And you know, I haven't had a chance to listen to Anne's report, but I'm not sure that Anne probably said Donald Trump fixed all of the great things in the beef industry the way that he was claiming to. And I think he was wrong to claim credit for higher beef prices. And I think he's wrong to say that Canada cheated. And it's just unfortunate that ultimately we are all kind of losers because of the erratic behavior of the U.S. president.
So, and when I say, you're right, facetiously, this mean ad, that is the perspective of course, the U.S. president taking it that way. And for those of us here in Canada who, of course, in the recent history said goodbye to Brian Mulroney, we saw a lot of the Mulroney-Reagan relationship brought up when we were thinking back to this prime minister and what the trade environment was like when these two were leaders, and exactly that, to your point, Tyler. I mean, I believe the Reagan Foundation has come out and said that they don't know that there was permission granted for using this. However, it's on YouTube, so I sort of feel like, you know, as a leader, as a historical figure, I don't know that that you can really control messaging that much later. But I do have a question about, Kelvin, I'll go to you first. From the perspective of, you know, a province putting this out versus a country, do you think it's a misstep on the part of Premier Doug Ford?
No, I don't think so. I think this has been in line with the Ford government's messaging. They have kind of played the bad cop in terms of if there's a good cop, bad cop approach to this from the Canadian perspective, where Mark Carney has been friendly with the president in the White House, and Doug Ford has threatened to cut off power to the Northeast U.S. and that type of thing in the past. And so this is in line with that. Of course, he has the auto sector that he's standing up for. I think there's a little bit of room for criticism maybe, or questioning why use Reagan's voice when a lot of Trump supporters aren't necessarily in line with the Reagan philosophy. And I think there's a reason for that, though, in that there are still a lot of Republicans in the U.S. that share Reagan's belief on free trade and markets being allowed to work and government not intervening and small government and that type of thing. There are still, I believe, a good portion in the Republican Party or people that have voted Republican that would share those values. They're maybe not as vocal as they were in the past because of the influence of Trump. And I think this is the Ford government aiming at those people, those lawmakers, policymakers in the Republican side of the aisle in the U.S., maybe not necessarily at the White House. They probably knew they were also poking the bear with that, and that's kind of Ford's style to do it that way too.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Tyler.
Lyndsey, I think in my mind the big question is how coherent is this with the federal government's strategy? And I think it's always dangerous when we have provinces out freelancing. I think that there was quite a bit of pushback over Danielle Smith in the spring when she was out trying to do her own thing. I think that same pushback around Doug Ford out doing his own thing applies now. Hopefully, behind the scenes, before the ad campaign was launched, there was some discussion with the other premiers and with the prime minister around how does this fit with the broader strategy. I think at the end of the day, we just don't know. Nobody knows what's going to work with the United States. That's the unfortunate reality of the time that we're in. I don't think that there is a right answer. Anybody's strategy is going to have pros and cons and can be debated. I just hope that there's some sort of coordination going on behind the scenes so that we don't have premiers out messing with what the federal government's trying to do. The premiers and the prime minister need to be on the same page with how we're dealing with the United States.
I do think that is one of my questions is, did Mark Carney's team know about this, and not to say that they necessarily would sign off on it, but I'm going to assume they knew about it. The timing, though, is not great as well. We did see things have escalated with Stellantis here in Ontario. Talk of potentially suing the company for taking things south, and also talk of changing their tariff status for any vehicles they want to bring into Canada. So not great timing between Ontario and the feds and manufacturing in this province, etc. So it definitely feels like any good sort of feelings from the last meeting that Carney and Trump have are at least on hold, at least for now. So I guess we see where it goes. Go ahead, Kelvin.
Go back in the middle of summer. Trump wanted Canada to lift its digital sales tax or digital services tax. Sure, Carney moved on it, and talks are back on 3 days later. So I'm not sure that Canada will have to make maybe there's a concession that Carney will have to announce here. I'm not sure, but it won't be more than a few days or weeks, maybe after the Supreme Court ruling, that I'm sure we'll hear that Dominic LeBlanc is back in Washington, D.C., meeting with Howard Lutnick and all those things happening again.
Potentially.
And I think, Lyndsey, the question is that concession that the Canada may need to make to get the deal back on an ag concession? Does it have, is it one of the other Ds and the 3 Ds that have dominated the relationship? It was defense, it was the digital services tax, and it was dairy. And the first 2 are kind of dealt with. So are we getting to the point where the Prime Minister is going to do something on dairy in order to try and appease the Americans?
Mm-hmm. Although, right now, Trump is trying to fix the beef market. So maybe he's just focused on that cow and not the black and white ones. One can hope, maybe. Okay. All right. Let's leave it there for just a moment. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more on RealAg Radio right after this.
What were the issues in your fields this year? Did you do a soil sample? What is your soil sample telling you about some of the nutrient issues that you might be having going into next year? What herbicides did you use? What residues you might be concerned about? What weed issues did you have? What crop residues did you have? How well do you know your fields?
Get the answers to all the questions you have about your pulse crop at the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. And hey, Alberta canola growers, now's your chance to shape the future of canola research. Complete the online Alberta Canola Research Survey by October 27th, and you could win one of 4 $100 Visa gift cards. Go to albertacanola.com/survey because great research starts with farmer insight. All right, we've got the issues panel. Tyler McCann, Kelvin Heppner, we're staying in North America, but moving on from our American friends, at least for now. It was a very busy week on unpacking all that happened between Canada and Mexico in the last little while. Kelvin, I'll start with you. You actually spoke with Ag Minister Heath McDonald, as well as several of the people that were at those meetings. Catch us up. How did it go? Are we now friends on? Very much so with Mexico.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's been a deepening of cooperation and alignment between Canada and Mexico, and there certainly is lots of work going on right now between governments of both countries, which, again, going back to our last segment, right now Canada and Mexico have a lot in common in terms of facing uncertain access into their largest customer market, that being the U.S., and so Canada and Mexico are finding that they have a lot of things that they can work closer together on, and we heard that from Ag Minister Heath McDonald You can find that on RealAgriculture.com and in our podcast and YouTube feeds. As well, we chatted with Keith Curry of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, Ron Lemaire of the Canadian Produce Marketing Association this week as well about the trip. And they seem excited. They talked about new energy around these relationships and things that have been taken for granted in the past that maybe could be leaned into. And some of this, they did announce a series of commitments from both countries in terms of making some changes already. One of them is digitization of import permits when it comes to some crops crossing the border. That's been an irritant for example, for canola from Canada going to Mexico, and Mexico is a significant customer of Canadian canola and a growing market. There's other aspects too when it comes to apples and pet food products for the beef industry. That were announced coming out of that bilateral meeting as well. And then following up on that, the bilateral discussions in Mexico City, the Trinational Accord, which is the representation of the U.S. state departments of agriculture and provinces here in Canada, as well as Mexican officials, met for a couple days last weekend in Morelia, Mexico. And it sounds like there's a lot of commitment there at that level from the representatives there, including a number of U.S. state secretaries of agriculture, to the trilateral arrangement and a commitment to maintaining the USMCA CUSMA TMEC arrangement. And certainly it seems like there's more momentum for that than there has been in the past, where people were maybe more reluctant to speak up in favor of maintaining that trilateral arrangement. So, yeah, I think a lot of positive news, maybe not hard export. There's no low-hanging, or there's not a lot of low-hanging fruit on the trade front, but it's certainly positive news. And one example Ron Lemaire of the CPMA gave was that Mexican exporters of produce traditionally in the past have sold into the U.S. and not known where it's gone from there, and a lot of those exports have come to Canada. And here we are in Canada buying something from a U.S. or from a Mexican supplier, and the Mexican supplier is not even aware of who their end customer is, and now they see opportunities for making a direct link. And of course, whenever you have a direct link between the supplier and customer, you can find more efficiencies and provide feedback both ways down the supply chain and that type of thing. So that's kind of an example of where I think there's opportunities that are being leaned into now.
Tyler, your thoughts on, not just the importance, of course, of Mexico, but, this focus of this meeting very much on specific areas of the food value chain. What have you heard from those who attended?
No, I think that everyone's quite positive, quite excited about the fact that the government is putting an effort on this, is putting a focus on this. But I think also realistic about the limited size of the Mexican market, kind of where those opportunities are, right? It's a bit of a double-edged sword. We will never be able to really diversify away from the United States without we will never be able to diversify away from the United States. But there are these opportunities for incremental gains in places around the world. Mexico isn't necessarily high on the list for kind of big incremental gains, but it is just such a important strategic partner that if we do want to kind of improve our position in our relationship in the North American context, we need to be able to work better with Mexico. So I think that there's kind of this, the commercial piece is good, it's positive, it's not going to be kind of game changing, but it's good. And then there's really interesting political strategic context that if we can figure out how to do that better, that's really good for Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's that's a big part of this trip. Sure, like Tyler said, there were some commercial commitments and type of things that were agreed to, regulatory red tape stuff that was agreed to as part of these meetings. But it's about setting the stage and building that relationship heading into the review of the North American trade deal next year.
Mm-hmm. One of the things, Kelvin, that sort of struck me was exactly that discussion of like port movement and those sorts of things of like, realistically, we have this gigantic trading partner in between Canada and Mexico, like literally and figuratively at times. But of course, that's rail, that's truck. But we have ports and we could be moving things more directly. So, but that to me also sort of just puts more pressure on an already pinched point of our logistics system.
Yeah, ports is an option. Rail is an option. We've got the CPKC rail line running right from northern Alberta down into northern British Columbia, down into deep into Mexico, and so you have to cross some more borders then, but I think that's where a lot of the focus right now is on figuring out, especially, and that's one of the things I think Mexico was asking about too, is some of our regulatory stuff at the border in terms of easing some of the red tape there too for when it comes to inspection requirements, permits, and all those types of things. There's lots of focus on where things can be made more efficient or even modernized, brought into the 21st century type of thing when it comes to that aspect of trade.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think there's this opportunity that if the government really wanted to take a serious approach to this, looking at things again like interswitching, which is again been a big thing for ag stakeholders, how do we make it easier to take full advantage of rail and of the NSF as, again, not a Canadian rail line, but a rail line that could come into Canada if that was made easier. I think that there's, again, this is a good example of when push comes to shove, how serious are we about making the changes we need to make to really make us more competitive in export markets. And interswitching is, I think, a good example of that, where hopefully this puts some extra pressure and focus on the government doing what it needs to do there.
So this is also a good segue into thinking federally. And this week we did get a speech. I'm not sure what to call it. Is this like a pre-budget speech, a budget preview? I'm not sure where we position this, but Prime Minister Mark Carney did give an address regarding what will be in the budget, but didn't necessarily name what would be in the budget. Tyler, maybe I'll go to you first. Your thoughts on how the Prime Minister did, anything that struck you from this discussion?
I think that there's clearly a need for the government to communicate that there are changes coming. But I think that the sense is that as much as this will be a big deficit, it's going to come with some cuts too. And so I think that that's what the Prime Minister's message was that he was trying to get across. This may have been a really big, bold speech for a central banker to make, but I don't think that this hit kind of the bar of a big, bold speech that a Prime Minister would make if he was setting the stage and direction. And so for those people that did sit through the 30-minute speech, I'm not sure that they had that much more certainty around what exactly is coming in the budget. But I think if you look at the way that the government was communicating it in the lead up to it, this is supposed to be our signal that kind of tough times are coming. We are going to have to make choices. We're not going to be able to do all of the things that we would like to do. But beyond that, it's really hard, I think, to get a sense as to what that means for the decisions that are going to be announced on November 4th.
Mm-hmm. And Kelvin, you asked Minister McDonald directly about the capital gains changes, those sorts of things, and we didn't necessarily get a lot of indication on exactly where these things are going to land.
No, he was asked about it at the Agriculture Committee as well yesterday that Tyler also appeared at, and it does sound like the capital gains change that was temporarily made back in January is going to be part of the budget. I like Tyler's framing though of this speech as a central banker type speech. Central bankers manage expectations. That's their main job is managing expectations and not surprising the market. And I think that's what this speech was from Carney. He used the word sacrifices, or the word sacrifices is in a lot of the headlines coming out of this speech. He's managing expectations for cuts and for reductions in government spending in some areas. I think ahead of the budget. I think that's what they were trying to do without overtly, or I guess they did say it to some extent, but I think just trying to get ahead of the budget in terms of not surprising people. And that's another thing that Minister McDonald alluded to in our conversation this week. He used the word scrubbing of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada programs and talked about redundancy and things like addressing that. And I think that's the type of approach we should expect or thing we should be expecting when it comes to the budget here in 10 days, roughly. So, yeah, I'm curious what that looks like, whether scrubbing involves deleting entire major programs or whether it is just small stuff around the edges. That's, I guess, yet to be seen.
But one of the things, Kelvin, that I found profound sort of in the last week was we did get the AG's report on the incredible failure of CRA to actually deliver. So just even on like the phone line of like helping people, just absolute abysmal service from this department. Like, I know that you're exactly right, that Carney is managing expectations of trying to sort of get us comfortable with, maybe being uncomfortable with some of the things. But I feel like, do we have to give up some things that maybe are working well for the sake of a budget when we clearly have like just an immense amount of mismanagement and poor results in all these departments. Like, can we not just perhaps improve what we already have and save our money there?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think their culture change may be the most effective thing in terms of maybe more effective than cutting at the budget level, or maybe make a bigger difference in terms of efficiency and driving investment and reducing frustration when it comes to investing in the Canadian market, that type of thing. So, yeah, I think we can do both in terms of being fiscally prudent and also making that change in terms of how government navigates things. And I think the CRA case study is a classic example of the challenges that businesses, individuals face when it comes to dealing with government in many cases.
But Lyndsey, we have to be careful when I think we can fool ourselves in thinking that like more efficient government is going to save billions of dollars. It will not, right? Like what government needs to do is make decisions around things that they're not going to do anymore. And I think, again, Minister MacDonald in his remarks before committee referred to overlap or duplication in programming. It seems like that's the frame that they're approaching these cuts in. And it's important to understand that there is overlap and duplication in programming. I think if you look at over the summer, right, FCC announced a $2 billion commitment to invest in innovation in Canadian agriculture. That now duplicates a bunch of Ag Canada programming. And that Ag Canada programming, I think to start with, there was a big question around how effective that innovation programming that Ag Canada was doing. So I think that there's an argument to be made that maybe Ag Canada should scrub those programs and let FCC take the lead. I think if you look at on the environmental side, there is quite a bit of overlap between what the federal programs are doing and what the provincial environmental programs are doing. And so I think that there's an argument to be made that there's duplication there. And so, like, I think if you really think about it, like, there is a lot of overlap and duplication. And I think there are ways that you can cut that, yes, will potentially reduce support to the sector, but may be able to cut a lot and have it not kind of be noticed that broadly at the end of the day. And I think it speaks to the value or lack thereof of some of the programs that exist.
The challenge, though, is at the 50,000-foot view, us talking about it as generalists here on the radio show, sure, they look like they're the same, but for people working in the trenches and people that work on these programs, they're like, our program's not the same as that kind of thing. And so that's where it will require political leadership to move ahead with that. And I'm not sure that cutting things that appear to be overlapping is going to meet the government's targets when it comes to moving funds into defense spending to meet the commitments that have been made there on the NATO front and that type of thing. So it may have to go beyond that. And making government more efficient sometimes requires spending more money on certain things. Mm-hmm. The PMRA and CFIA, there would be examples where they need proper resources to get papers off of the desk and back to the applicants when it comes to new products or registration type things. And they need proper resources to be an efficient operation. If they don't have enough resources, it slows everything down. So yeah, there's tough decisions to be made there in terms of making priorities.
But Kelvin, again, I think that for as much as everybody thinks that the program that they're getting money from is different, when you talk about innovation in Canada, what you hear is fragmentation and overlap and duplication and confusion about kind of this mass of programs that are out there. I think that we can drive down to specific programs to talk about it. This isn't just a generalist issue. We have a confusing program landscape that is not as impactful as it could be. And at a minimum, we can spend better, but I think we can spend better and spend less and get better outcomes at the end of the day if we're smarter. I think that's one of the things I'm waiting to see. Does the government just cut money, or do they actually change how they do things and how they work so that we can get better results of whatever amount of money is left at the end of the day?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's about results and outcomes. How we get there is less important.
Okay. We're way over time for a break. So we're going to take a quick break and come back for our last segment here on the Issues Panel here on RealAg Radio.
If you only listen to RealAg Radio, you only get half the picture. For greater insight into the issues that affect farming, tune in to RealAgriculture.com. Crops, livestock, machinery, farm management, and the markets, even food and travel. Real Agriculture Online digs deeper into the topics that affect the way you work and live. So get connected today. Read, watch, and listen to the people who know at RealAgriculture.com.
I'm Lyndsey Smith, host of The Agronomist, and I want to thank you for tuning in for over 200 episodes of our beloved little program. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube for our live and interactive agronomy Q&A. Each week, our guest panel will handle some of your toughest agronomic questions live, streaming on YouTube, Facebook, X, and RealAgriculture.com. Tune in Monday nights or go to RealAgriculture.com/agronomist and sign up for our email notifications and don't miss an episode. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It's our last segment here of the Issues Panel. And hey, brought to you by an organization you may know, Tyler. The Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute is driving bold policy solutions for a resilient Canadian agri-food system and building a stronger future for Canadian agriculture. Visit CAPI-ICPA.com to discover how. Yes, that's right. We've got Tyler McCann, Kelvin Heppner. The two of you happened to be on a webinar yesterday with CAPI through our partnership on ag innovation. So great segue from the last segment. I want to remind everybody to head on over to our YouTube channel, to CAPI's YouTube channel. You can watch the replay on RealAgriculture.com as well. But Kelvin, I'll start with you from the perspective, and I know in talking about, just last segment about the fragmentation, the silos, the overlap, all these things from your perspective, from yesterday's discussion. Are there clear areas in Canada we need to be addressing on the ag innovation front of moving things from, computer or lab or idea through to actual implementation?
It seems like there is consensus building. There's certainly consensus building that we are in we're facing, whether it's a crisis or not. That was the topic to draw people into the webinar yesterday. Are we in an ag innovation crisis in Canada? And not everybody says that we're in crisis yet, but we're on our way there, is the consensus at least. And further to that, we're definitely seeing more people talking about this and what needs to happen to unlock this potential and unlock innovation in Canada over the last number of years. And I think talking about it is the first step. There was consensus in the webinar yesterday, I'd say, from our panelists and opening speaker too, about the need for reduced fragmentation, as Tyler alluded to last segment, the need for more cooperation and coordination. What that looks like is, I'm not sure everybody agrees on who or what form that should take, but the need for more communication and more of a network approach where there isn't as much redundancy and replication and 5 different places to go to get different conflicting pieces of information on what to do next to bring a product forward or invest in a certain business or facility in Canada, that type of thing. So the need for more of a one-stop place to go that has an overarching goal of advancing innovation in the Canadian economy, I think. And it's maybe not just an agricultural issue either to further complicate this. So Tyler can add to that, though.
Yes, Tyler. From your perspective, these conversations are incredibly important, but more important is the action that comes after. So where are some of these sticking points? Where do we see actual advancement happening quickly?
I think, as Kelvin said, I think that there's agreement that we've got a structural issue, right? The way that the system works doesn't get the most impactful outcomes. It does lead to duplication and overlap across the country. I think when you think about kind of the action that comes out of it, it's a question of, okay, so what does the solution look like? How do we decide? I think there was a reference to more of a kind of a confederation model. So it doesn't necessarily mean you've got federal government saying this is how the research should be done, but it enables you to build a system so that there's more connection across the country, so that you can say maybe one university is going to focus on genetics and one's going to focus on nutrition, and you can kind of work together on that. It enables you to say, okay, this is kind of the early stage research that's happening. Here's the organizations, the companies that are looking to commercialize it or develop that work. How that kind of what that model looks like, I think, is really the big question. And I think it's something where as we look at work that we're going to do is how do you try and build that in a way that respects the difference. Like it is different whenever you're trying to grow wheat in Western Quebec than when you're growing it in Northern Alberta. Like that's, yes, we need to understand that. We need to reflect that, but we need to find ways to be more coherent in what we fund and what we do from an innovation perspective, because this is a space where I think, unfortunately, we're going to have to figure out how do we do more with less at the end of the day. Like that's, the private sector is already spending quite a bit less. That's something that we heard over and over again yesterday. The public sector may spend less too. So how do we get better impact?
Kelvin, from that perspective, like to me, it means probably exactly that. Cooperation, collaboration, like it means working together on things and bringing perhaps groups together that haven't maybe worked together before. Do you see that happening, or is that a barrier to even moving some of this forward?
Oh, it is a barrier. I think it is happening. There's certainly people realizing that it unlocks value to work together and collaborate. It's a question of also turf and this is our lane, stay in your lane. That kind of thing is always a factor in this. And I'm also, and I expressed this on the webinar yesterday, and we've discussed it here before in the past too. I'm reluctant about creating a new bureaucracy or new centralized organization that picks winners and losers. And I think there's ways of doing this, coordinating without having that type of organization. But to me, rather what's the saying? Let 1,000 flowers bloom or something like rather be gardeners than designers, to use the book from a few years ago. What's his name? Brian Crowley, I think, wrote it. That type of approach to R&D. But yeah, at the same time, there is obviously a need for more of a coordinated, collaborative approach to this, and the ways that public money is spent. We are also seeing, of course, major economic pressure on profitability in the crop side of agriculture, and then you have the tariff impact on the manufacturing and processing side of things in some cases. So that's not going to help with boosting budgets for private R&D or with taxpayer budgets for public R&D. And so, yeah, it's certainly, there's a lot of headwinds against this, and I wonder whether the necessity of figuring out new ways is going to ultimately be what drives some new model for this going forward.
Mm-hmm. And Lyndsey, I'm not sure if Kelvin is advocating for cutting all spending on this, but as long as government is spending money, it is picking winners and losers. Like that is the reality. We can pretend that it's not, right? But when you've got research clusters that are getting money that you have to decide how much goes to canola versus pork or whatever the choice may be, if you've got only so much innovation money to go and you're looking at which developers do we support, like those choices are being made. We are picking winners or losers. We're just not doing it in a coherent, meaningful way. So yes, it would be great if we created this great fertile land and we let all the flowers bloom and it was all really wonderful. But in the meantime, we're in this world of government is making investments. They may make less, but they're still going to do it. How do we get more out of it? And that does require some way of working together. Hopefully it's not another bureaucracy. That would be great. But heavens, we haven't figured out how to do this well today. Absent that something needs to change. And I will say, I think often we hear that, we will hear lots of groups talk about, oh, we are collaborating together. But heavens, I mean, the bar for collaboration is set really, really low. And I think we need to be a lot more honest about the fact that we don't collaborate well in this country. And we do compete against provinces and against commodities. That's a real issue.
Industry. Yeah. I'm actually going to blow your minds a little bit, guys. I actually think we're halfway in on the picking winners and losers. I figure either get out or actually pick winners and losers. And so I actually think sometimes we don't go far enough. We're sort of pregnant. We don't actually hop in with both feet and say, this is what we're driving. We sort of, we split everything around, and sure, yeah, we probably pick a few and things to focus on. And I get that, politically that's probably harder to actually sell, which is why it probably doesn't happen. But I feel we are very Canadian on some of these things and we don't go all in. Kelvin, you want to tell me I'm wrong?
I don't think you're always wrong. You're definitely, you're often right. But in this example, there are success stories. There are examples where it does work, but then there are extreme failures, and you only need to look at the electric vehicle money that the federal government has spent over the last 5 years, and what has that yielded us? There are spin-off benefits when governments invest in things like that, but you've got Stellantis and these companies moving production south. despite the Canadian government having invested billions and billions upon billions of Canadian taxpayer dollars in these businesses that appear to be not yielding the returns that government bet would be there. And so that's where I don't think government is necessarily the best way, best equipped.
But Kelvin, it does
market to decide.
It doesn't need to be government that decides, right? There could be industry leadership if the industry was willing to show leadership. I think the reason why government has to decide is because industry can't show leadership. There is no space where people are coming and saying, look, this is where we see the opportunity. And I think that you end up in these odd spaces. Plant breeding, I think, is a really good example. Ag Canada has got out of minor crop breeding programs effectively. Arguably, that's where they should be. That's where the market failure is going to be. But they seem to have protected wheat breeding kind of at all costs at the expense of kind of the crops where they will never get a private breeder in, and they're staying in spaces that there are. There should be some more coherence around what does that look like. That doesn't mean the government should be the one deciding, but we should make a decision, to Lyndsey's point, around what we're going to do and what we're going to not, and be a lot more transparent about it.
And we've certainly had failures in you could argue on the
plant protein would be another example.
Exactly. That one, though, I think definitely government involvement, definitely government money or arms like government money, but also private money as well. So, okay, we have to leave it there. We are going to do a bonus, though. I promised it last week. So for all of you who downloaded the podcast, that's coming up next. For those of you who haven't downloaded the podcast, you still can. Head on over to RealAgriculture.com/radio. You can download this episode and all past episodes as well, if you so choose. Tyler, Kelvin, enjoy the game tonight.
Should be a good one, I think.
Go Blue Jays.
Go Jays. Okay.
Go Jays. Go Jays.
Cheers, everybody. All right, welcome to the bonus where Kelvin apologizes for everything he said on air.
I mean,
I didn't mean that you're always wrong. I meant that example isn't always doesn't always yield.
I look forward to RealAg promoting the clip where Kelvin says, "Lyndsey, you're wrong."
Lyndsey, you're actually wrong about everything, and it's surprising you're ever allowed to host the show. Okay, all right. This is the bonus, though. Thank you all for downloading the podcast. We appreciate it, and you get to hear the RealAg after Derek. Close enough. Anyway, Tyler, I'm going to go to you first. What did we not talk about on the show that we need to mention, or we only want to mention? Oh, maybe it's that his internet in the stairwell is not so good. Kelvin, I guess we're going to you first. What did we not talk about?
Oh, I think we did cover everything in my notes here in terms of we touched on a lot here in terms of everything from the beef industry, Truth Social posts in the U.S. to Canada and Mexico. Yeah, I don't know.
I put in our notes, so everybody, if ever you want us to talk about something, just let us know on like Thursday, and we'll add it to our notes. But friend of mine, Devin Walker out of Saskatchewan, pointed out that it is the official beginning of pointy toe shoe season, which is meeting season. Now, of course, we've been meeting for a little while, but this is sort of our transition. As we sort of turn the page to November, we are into like 4-ish, maybe 5 months of meeting season. And so we do have a poll up on RealAgriculture.com asking what events you plan to go to this winter. And those include, your producer group AGMs, maybe a webinar like we had yesterday, or, maybe you're going to go down south and ignore work entirely, which is also allowed. Please bring me. Okay, Tyler, what did we not talk about on the show?
Well, just on the events, I'll say, so we're talking about this internally as a team. If people have thoughts around what makes a good event and what would be different and what makes you want to go, feel free to drop me a line. Really look forward to some broader feedback on that. That'll help some of the things that we're talking about. Yeah. I mean, we didn't talk too much about Minister MacDonald being at committee. I was there yesterday. He was in the block before me. I think it's always kind of interesting to see where the government and the opposition parties agree and where they don't. On the regulatory reform study that I was at after, pretty broad agreement. I think the Liberal and the Conservative members of the committee and the bloc members all agree that the government, that officials need to do a heck of a lot more than they're doing today to reduce the regulatory burden. But the minister got into some sparring matches with some of the opposition members over things that they're doing or not, some of the questions that are unanswered. And it was kind of interesting to see where those battle lines are that are being drawn and what that might mean for how things play out. I think that Minister MacDonald is maybe too nice of a guy. I think he could have fought back a little bit more, but I think that he's still trying to kind of figure out, I guess, where he's going. And it was interesting to see again him and Barlow in particular getting into it a couple times.
On the China file, especially, Barlow set it up to ask his clip-worthy moment about whether Minister MacDonald has met with his counterparts from China on the canola tariffs, and the clear answer was no, he had not, and that certainly makes it look like the government isn't maybe doing everything that they can on this file. At least that's the conservative messaging on it. There was also some battle lines, Tyler, about the temporary foreign worker program and where that's headed. It's interesting. The Liberals are clearly defending the temporary foreign worker program right now, while the Conservatives are being negative about it, but at the same time raising concerns about the future of the seasonal agricultural workers program. There was a question there where Minister MacDonald couldn't definitively say that the Liberal government plans on keeping the seasonal ag, the SOP program. A question from MP Dave Epp about that. So there was maybe the most noteworthy thing, Tyler, and maybe this is me reading between the lines. I felt like there was more tension between Minister MacDonald and the leader of the CFIA that was sitting beside him at the committee than in the past. Like, there's clear onus from Minister MacDonald that he wants CFIA to move quicker is what it felt like. And I was surprised how upfront he was. Normally, when the Ag Minister appears at committee, there isn't that level of tension. It felt like in terms of he expressing like CFIA is not doing everything that like I've expressed to them my views that they need to move faster on some of this red tape stuff. So
I'll tell you based on the conversations that I'm kind of having, in the hallway, so to speak, or kind of the chatter with people in and around the government. I think they are quite dissatisfied with where the government's gone on regulatory reform. I think that there is this expectation that CFIA is kind of dragging its feet on a variety of different issues. And I think that we're at this point where if we really want to change things, like, officials need to be held to account. I think that you hear lots of people in industry saying, like, we need to start tying performance bonuses to them actually changing things. I don't know if it's that or something else, but we have to understand that there's only so much that politicians can do. It's the bureaucrats that work in this space every day that are the problem. And again, it's going to be interesting to see at what point in time Minister MacDonald or his counterpart at Health or the Prime Minister or the new clerk of the Privy Council starts to say, like, look, this is enough. We need to start to clean house in places like CFIA. It certainly seems like there was an issue. And going back to some earlier committee appearances with where CFIA was there, one of the points of tension is that the Liberals in their platform committed to incorporate economic and food security considerations into the mandate of CFIA and PMRA. CFIA officials basically said, we don't need to do that. It's already there. And I don't think that message went over very well. I think anybody that works with CFIA would be very skeptical that they really take these issues into account. And so I think that I expect some changes are coming there. It really seems like there's an appetite for pushing further and harder on the bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
On a lot of files, it feels like Minister MacDonald, like Tyler said, is still trying to get up to speed or trying to figure out what his vision is for the issue. But it seems like on that one, at least, maybe it was more body language and tone, but maybe I'm reading too much into it. But it seems like he's starting to get frustrated with CFIA and how slow things have moved on some of the red tape reduction stuff.
I don't think it's just. I don't think you're reading anything wrong into it, Kelvin. Again, I think if you look at what the CFIA put out and PMRA and Health put out for regulatory reform earlier this year, where I think we talked on the show about how underwhelming that was. I think that's not just us that was underwhelmed by that. I think that was ministers and their staff too.
And I do get the sense, and so it will make for a very interesting winter, let's say, and going forward, that there does seem to be a shift in mindset with this government that I think we will see make its way down to the departments and to the bureaucracy. And change is hard, and it can be uncomfortable and is likely going to cause some friction. And so, Kelvin, that is potentially exactly what you're seeing. And I guess we'll see how quickly that all happens. Interesting times for anyone.
Well, and Lyndsey, I think part of what's happening right now is everybody's waiting for the budget. It seems like,
exactly.
Again, a lot of work happened over the summer. There's the sense that kind of hard changes coming, but nobody can get ahead of the budget. And so now we're kind of in this awkward lull where everybody's looking at each other going, okay, who's going to have a job kind of 6 months from now inside the bureaucracy? And so that's kind of dragging things out a bit.
Yeah. But we don't have that much longer to wait. One thing we didn't talk about were all the rumors this week that there was going to be floor crossing. So, we'll just leave it at that. If anybody wants, just text me if you want to know the details. But, I mean, it's also public that there are plenty of media people, in mainstream media, sort of lamenting that they spent all this time following this rabbit trail of, potential floor crossing that never happened. But you know what? Tyler, I think it's just that there was exactly this lull waiting for the budget, and what better time to start rumors? So there you go.
Well, so I think it's not just that. I think that there are lots of conservative MPs that are not kind of happy with where the kind of the leader of the party is going. I think that there's a bit of a sense in the Conservative Party that Poilievre was going to get this reconfirmed as a leader, and that's not going to change anything. There's this, again, stories quoting conservative MPs anonymously saying Poilievre hasn't learned enough lessons, but kind of what can they do about it? And then on the flip side, I think the Liberals are looking around going, boy, it would be nice to have a majority government. They're only a couple of MPs away, and I'm sure that it's tempting to start offering up some cabinet positions or whatever it might take to get some opposition MPs across the floor.
Although it is one of those things, I mean, at least in Canadian politics, crossing the floor usually doesn't, for the person that crosses, usually doesn't work out all that well. But, you know, some people are pawns and some people are rooks, right? Like
there's safety in numbers, and the talk this week was of more than one.
More than one, yeah. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. We'll see what happens. Thank you both for joining me here on RealAg Radio and this special bonus segment. I do appreciate it. Kelvin, you get the say here officially before the series starts. How many games? Are we going the full 7? Or do they take it in 6?
Yeah. No, let's say 6. We'll say Blue Jays in 6.
Okay.
Blue Jays in 6.
And if Sean was here, he would say that at the beginning of the season you said they weren't going to make it. But we're going to pull the tape.
Sean would say that I said it. We actually do need to go pull the clip.
We do need to go pull
it. I said it exactly that.
No, you didn't. Well, actually, I don't know. Okay.
They have surprised the upside for sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Tyler, have a wonderful weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Have a great weekend.